Hi, today I'll be discussing part 2 of my favorite albums in 1978, because I have a lot of albums from this year, and that when I did the first part a little while back, I did the 15 albums that I was most familiar with, like Journey's Infinity, Queens' Jazz, and Bob Seger's Stranger in Town. So for this part, I'll be discussing albums that I am most familiar with, least familiar with, or I've gotten familiar with in recent months. And also, I discussed 2 of the Kiss solo albums in part 1, Ace and Paul's. So for this part, I'll be discussing a little later in the video, Gene and Peters. So without further ado, here are part 2 of my favorite albums of 1978. First up is UK, a prog rock supergroup. John Wetton's voice is great on this, as with Alan Holdsworth's guitar playing. In the Dead of Night and Time to Kill are just interesting prog songs, while 30 Years is just a soft to heavy, great number. By the Light of Day is interesting, in that this is just kind of an alright prog album. My fun fact about the UK album is that before this progressive rock supergroup even got formed, early versions of In the Dead of Night and 30 Years had already been written by Eddie, John, and Bill. Next up, we have this hard rock legend's 4th album, Weekend Warriors by Ted Nugent. This, to me, is not as memorable as his first 3 albums, but there are some good hard rockers on here, like Tight Spots, the title track, Good Friends and a Bottle of Wine, and Need You Bad. And the album's cover art is just very war-esque, with the headstock of his guitar being a fire gun. And his love of deer hunting and raising families present in this album's inner sleeve photos. Again, as I said, not as memorable as albums like Cat Scratch Fever and his first album, but kind of alright if you want to get into Ted's music with this. My fun fact about Weekend Warriors is that the sleeve art was done by British artist Jeff Cummins and was initially commissioned by Wee Magazine to accompany an interview that Ted did. Next is this a greatest hits album from one of the most celebrated bands in British rock. When We Rock, and When We Roll by Deep Purple. 8 of their biggest hits are on here, some of which are live renditions like Women from Tokyo, Space Truckin', and of course Smoke on the Water. You can't go wrong with that. It's just a kind of alright compilation of songs that Dennis C. Nichols created according to the liner notes. And it's got a very interesting spaceship-like cover art. That it's like they go into space somewhere and say that what the album's title says, we rock when we rock, and we roll when we roll. My fun fact about this compilation album is that this record was released as a counterpart in North America and Japan, owing to the Deep Purple singles A's and B's compilation, which was simultaneously released in other markets. This next album is a Southern Rock Band's live album. You want to try and take a guess? Alright, I'll show it to you. Bring It All Back Alive by the Outlaws. A lot of great renditions of Southern rock songs in here, like Holiday, Freeborn Man, Stick Around for Rock and Roll, and of course the over 20-minute long song Green Grass and High Tides. The guitar playing from Hugh Thomason, Billy Jones, and Freddie Salem soar for this, while the 2 drummers named David and Monty just give it a double punch sound compared to usual rock bands, which will only use 1 drum set. This is just an amazing live album and very American. Has a very patriotic feel to it. My 2 fun facts about this live album from this Southern rock band is that this album, as I said earlier, is most famous for the over 20-minute version of the song Green Grass and High Tides, which closed most of their shows and is the entirety of side 4 of this album, and that this live recording was recorded in 4 cities, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Miami, between September and November of 1977, with the Miami show being broadcasted live on WSHE radio. Next up, we have a member of the Eagles' solo album, one of them. But seriously, folks, There are some good songs on here like Indian Summer and Inner Tube, but obviously everyone in the classic rock world knows Life's Been Good, which is my favorite song from this album, and like with the Deep Purple, a very eye-popping album cover. Of course, this isn't as memorable as the stuff he did for the Eagles, but it's got some good songs on here. My fun fact about But Seriously Folks is that back in 1980, 2 years after this album was released, Joe ran a mock campaign for president, and one of its planks was to make the album's most popular song, Life's Been Good, the new national anthem. This was adopted during the Eagles' tour for their album, The Long Run. Next up, we have an album that has one of the most legendary voices of metal singing, and one of the most legendary guitarists. Long Live Rock and Roll by Rainbow. The songs like the title track, Lady of the Lake, and even The Shed are just fantasy metal at its finest, while Gates of Babylon and Rainbow Eyes are beautiful ballads with the strings and orchestra on Rainbow Eyes giving it a nice, beautiful feel to this metal thing. And it's got this amazing photograph that has probably been recreated countless times. My two fun facts about this album is that, along with the other releases from this band, this album is cited as a strong influence on the formation of the power metal genre, especially with its fantasy-themed lyrics and aesthetics. That this album would turn out to be the swan song for Ryan James Dio, who would go on to join Black Sabbath after Ozzy got fired, and have a highly successful solo career later on. Next up, we have an album by a new wave performer that a couple months before this album got banned from Saturday Night Live because of a certain incident involving a certain song on this album. This year's Model by Elvis Costello. A lot of great new wave upbeat songs on here, like This Year's Girl, You Belong to Me, Pump It Up, and obviously Radio Radio, which the song, when Elvis did that on Saturday Night Live, he got banned because he was told not to play it, but he did it anyway. Elvis's voice and guitar are just goofy for British new wave, as it always is with most of these bands from this era, and that this is kind of a great follow-up to his debut album, My Aim Is True. This is just probably one of Elvis's best albums, if you ask me. My fun fact about this year's Model, which is a very interesting one, is that the original UK release included the politically charged song Night Rally and the song Chelsea, but when this record got issued in America, Columbia insisted on swapping them out for Radio Radio, a song Elvis did, as I said, and got banned on SNL for doing it back in 1977. The move worked out ultimately in his favor, as it became one of his most celebrated songs. Halfway there, almost, this next band is another legendary Midwestern rock favorite, or a band that came from the Midwest. Heaven Tonight by Cheap Trick. Other than the first song, Surrender, there's a lot of good, memorable songs on here, like On Top of the World, Taking Me Back. Heaven Tonight is just an eerie rocker, the title track. And Off Wierson is the band writing their usual pop rock song in a German language. Of course, Surrender is the most well-known song, which is about having conflicts between mom and dad and having there be memorable lines like rolling numbers, rock and roll, and got my Kiss records out. And I've heard that the wax recorded. This is just one of Cheap Trick's best. And that two interesting fun facts about their third album is that this is the first ever album recorded with a 12-string electric bass that bassist Tom Peterson plays. And that this album was released over in Japan weeks before it even came out in America. Their success in Japan would ultimately lay down the groundwork for their stateside domination, And next record, which I talked about in part 1 at Budokan the following year. Number 7 of this pack is Santana's 10th album, Inner Secrets. A lot of great rock, Latin-flavored rock songs on here, like One Chain, Don't Make No Prison. Life is a Lady / Holiday is good. And of course, Open Invitation, which rocks. And that I've heard that song many times. Carlos Santana's guitar work is just as always great as it was on his other albums, and that this cover just shows all 9 members looking at each other in a very questionable way. My fun facts about Inner Secrets that I have is that unlike the fusion of Latin, jazz, and rock that characterized previous Santana albums, this album itself was considered a rock album. This next album is one of New Jersey's most biggest performers, his 4th album, and it's a turning point from the lyrical and stuff he did before this. You want to try and guess? Okay, it's Darkness on the Edge of Town by the legendary Bruce Springsteen. A lot of great memorable songs on here like Prove It All Night, Badlands, Adam Raised a Cain, and the ballad-like title track. The lyrics here are just... This is where Bruce starts to get political, like he has done still to this day. Candy's Room kind of is a fast, upbeat one that Max Weinberg's drumming dominates in. There's just a lot of cool, crazy stuff on here. My fun fact about Darkness on the Edge of Town is that the album's themes that are discussed on here focus on older, struggling characters fighting against overwhelming odds, inspired by John Steinbeck novels, John Ford films, punk rock, and country music, which are less tied to the Jersey Shore themes that Bruce had sang about and discussed on Greens from Asbury Park, Wild Innocent, E Street Shuffle, and Born to Run, his first 3 albums. Okay, we are now in the top 5. This 5th album is something I said I'd talk about earlier in the video, because I did 2 of these in part 1. Now I'm doing this one part 2 now. The Peter Criss solo album from Kiss. The least Kiss sounding of the 4 is just kind of very solid and interesting. Good mix of R&B like I'm Gonna Love You and Hooked on Rock and Roll. And some beautiful ballads like Don't You Let Me Down, Easy Thing, and I Can't Stop the Rain. Rock Me Baby is just a very rockin' love song, and that his rendition of the 60s soul song Tossin' and Turnin' is a stellar song on here too. My fun fact about Peter Criss's solo album is that Peter explained in his 2012 autobiography, Make Up to Break Up, that his solo album reflected his musical taste, which is why it features Motown-inspired R&B with horns and backup singers, unlike the hard rock that Kiss is best known for doing. Next up is a both reggae and punk-influenced debut album from this legendary British trio. Outlandos D'Amour by the Police. A lot of great punk-sounding songs and reggae songs like Next to You, Hole in My Life, Can't Stand Losing You, Be My Girl Sally, and of course Roxanne, which is the biggest hit from here. Stuart Copeland's drums are just great on here, while the lyrics, bass, and vocals of Sting are just eye-popping and ear-hooking. Born in the 50s is an interesting time capsule of what it was like to be a teenager in the 60s, while the song Peanuts is a very interesting song that has Andy Summers' guitar playing sound like a siren at one point in the song, and this is just a great debut album from one of rock's most legendary trios. My fun fact about Outlandos D'Amour is that Miles Copeland, Stuart Copeland, the drummer's brother, initially wanted to name this album Police Brutality. However, after hearing the song Roxanne and envisioning a more romantic image for the band, the title that finally stuck was chosen instead. My second most favorite album in 1978 is another great prog album from one of progressive rock's legendary bands, Pieces of Eight by Styx. A lot of great radio songs on here like Blue Collar Man and Renegade, and a lot of hard rockers like Great White Hope. Sing for the Day is just a very interesting medieval sounding song while I'm Okay just showcases solid keyboard playing from this group's keyboardist, and this is one of the biggest albums from Styx. And not to mention, it's got a very interesting cover art with the band's faces mirroring statues at a very legendary place that I'll share right now. My 2 fun facts about Pieces of Eight are that, according to StyxWorld.com, the design and positioning of the mature female heads on this album cover and inside the gatefold is patterned after the monolithic stone statues that appear all throughout Easter Island, right in Chile, and that the pipe organ solo Dennis DeYoung recorded for I'm Okay was done at the St. James Cathedral in Chicago, which is the oldest Episcopal church in the nation. Now, my second favorite album from 78 of this bunch is the last of the Kiss solo albums, Jeans. Very diverse, with hard rock, songs that sound like the Beatles, songs with orchestras, even a rendition of a beloved Disney song on here, When You Wish Upon a Star. Radioactive is just a cool way to open the album and has this evil laughing demon intro. Man of a Thousand Faces is another interesting song, and his take on rock and roll over See You in Your Dreams is better on here than the one they did 2 years earlier on that. And he has a lot of special guests on here, like Joe Perry from Aerosmith, Bob Seger, Cher. A lot of people make guest appearances, like Donna Summer, Helen Reddy, Cheap Trick's Rick Nielsen. This is just one of the most interesting Kiss albums and very diverse. My fun fact about Gene's solo album is that even though he's Kiss's bassist, he left all the bass playing duties to Neil Jason and mainly plays all electric and acoustic guitars on the album. And that initially, he wanted to name this album Man of a Thousand Faces after one of its songs. Then all the band members decided and agreed to simply call each record just Kiss, with the band members' name to avoid people from thinking that the band would break up. Now, number 1 of the second bunch is a live album, another one, but I've been more familiar with this band than other bands I've talked about, because I've liked them since a young age, and that this is the only live album to have this certain legendary frontman singing. If You Want Blood, You've Got It by AC/DC. The only live album they ever did with Bon Scott singing, and boy, it's an interesting one. Their earlier favorites like The Jack, High Voltage, Let There Be Rock, and Whole Lotta Rosie get better live treatments than the studio versions, and that the guitar playing of the Young Brothers is what makes these album and this band a classic. Bon's bluesy vocals dominate this live set, and that this shows how great AC/DC were live in the late 70s. And the cover art, not to mention, is interesting with the neck of Angus's guitar surging into his body, and that Bon's holding on to him as his SG is being sunk in. This is just one of the most interesting live albums, many interesting live albums that were dominated the mid to late 70s live album renaissance. My fun fact about this AC/DC album is that Scottish DJ Tom Russell has claimed that this gig summed up what made this group so special live. The concert that was recorded live in Glasgow was, quote, a great reminder of how remarkable the band and their fans were that night, the Scottish DJ recalled. Anyway, there it is. There was my second batch of my favorite albums in 1978. I hope you enjoyed this video and that if you missed out on an album from this year that you like or enjoy, you can always check part 1. I'll put it in the comment link below so you can see that, and that I'll be making more of these videos pretty soon about other years and other topics and other adventures. This is Alex from My Favorite Facts About Music and Other Cool Topics, signing off.